old, and I've been married to Harry for the past 7 years. I love just about everything about our marriage, except for one thing, his relationship with his sister, Kayla. She's like a dark cloud that never stops looming over us, always bringing negativity into our lives. Now, don't get me wrong. When I first met Kayla, I actually liked her. I really did. But as time passed, my opinion of her changed fast. She's toxic, manipulative, and just plain exhausting to be around. Knowing what kind of person she is, I've spent years trying to stay on her good side. Back when Harry was 17, he dated one of Kayla's best friends, but that relationship didn't last because he had only gone along with it due to Kayla's pressure. Later, when he was 23 and single again, she tried to set him up with another one of her friends. He wasn't interested, and when he made that clear, she ran straight to their parents, crying about how she wanted him to marry someone she approved of. That turned into a big fight, but thankfully, their parents didn't take her too seriously. When Harry and I met and started falling in love, his parents were incredibly supportive. Kayla, on the other hand, was ice cold toward me from the start. Anytime I was around, she made a point to bring up Harry's exes for no reason at all, going on about how great they were doing and even suggesting he should reconnect with them. This went on for a while. Even Harry found it weird and told her to knock it off. I wasn't the only one who noticed her behavior. But when he finally confronted her, Kayla flew into a rage and started mocking me, saying I was just jealous and that Harry could do way better than someone like me. Whenever Harry's parents invited us over for dinner, Kayla would somehow accidentally run into one of his exes that same day and then invite her along. She also doesn't follow me on Instagram, yet she's always the first person to watch my stories. Since my account is public, I can see that she keeps tabs on me constantly. If a guy ever commented on one of my pictures, she'd run straight to Harry, complaining that I was posting inappropriate photos. Harry and I actually found that hilarious. When Harry and I decided to move in together, she tried to convince him to break up with me, listing off all the reasons why I wasn't wife material and swearing she could find someone way better for him. That one really stung, especially since I had done nothing but be nice to her. And unfortunately, her behavior only got worse once we got engaged. When we announced our engagement, everyone cheered and congratulated us. Everyone except Kayla. She just sat there, oddly quiet, clearly not happy about it. Then, out of nowhere, she jumped up from her chair, shocking everyone, and stormed out of the gathering. Later that night, she called Harry in tears, shouting about how she hated finding out about the engagement at the same time as everyone else. She claimed that since she was the closest person to him, she should have been told first. Not long after, she sent me a message that was borderline threatening, lecturing me on how I should treat her brother, because, according to her, she had always been the only woman in his life. The whole thing gave me chills. It was just unsettling. I didn't even bother responding. I left her message on scene, knowing full well that ignoring her would only make her angrier. From that moment on, whenever she saw me, she acted like I didn't exist. But oddly enough, she still insisted on being involved in every part of the wedding planning, showing up to dress shopping, attending my bridal shower, and inserting herself into conversations about the details. And even though both my fiancé and future mother-in-law called her out on it multiple times, her negativity only grew worse. She made it clear she disapproved of nearly every decision I made. One day, she happened to overhear me discussing the centerpiece with my future mother-in-law, and without hesitation, she jumped in just to mock me. She sneered, saying my choice was tasteless, and then, as if that wasn't enough, she went on about how this was exactly why she wanted her brother to marry someone better. That was it. I snapped. I'd had enough of her constant criticism and passive-aggressive jabs. I made it crystal clear that she was no longer welcome at our wedding, shouting that I was done putting up with her endless taunts and negativity. Kayla looked completely stunned, gasping as if it had never crossed her mind that I might actually stand up to her. She was furious, not just at me but also at my mother-in-law, who openly supported me. Not long after, She called Harry, whining about how I had humiliated her and demanding that he control me since I was going to be his wife. But Harry wasn't having any of it. He made it clear that he stood by my decision and that unless she made amends, she wouldn't be welcome at the wedding. Begrudgingly, she sent me what seemed like a sincere apology. I saw it and, once again, left her on read. At that point, I was completely drained from wedding planning, and I wasn't about to get sucked into more of her drama. In the end, she did attend our wedding, mostly because I figured if she wasn't there, she'd just use it as another excuse to badmouth us. Everyone else, including the guests, happily followed the wedding's color scheme of soft pinks and pastels. But Kayla? She showed up looking like she was headed to a funeral, wearing a floor-length black gown, complete with a veil. To say we were shocked would be an understatement. She spent the entire event walking around, sulking and telling anyone who would listen that she was mourning the loss of her brother to another woman. At the reception, Harry finally pulled her aside and confronted her about her ridiculous outfit. She immediately flipped the situation around, playing the victim and accusing me of being too controlling for even commenting on what she wore. But when she refused to stop making a scene, my in-laws finally had enough. Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law told her to leave. The whole thing was humiliating for me. From that day on, I avoided her entirely. And when I gave birth to our son, Nate, I made it very clear that I didn't want her anywhere near him. Of course, she fought against it, but my in-laws backed me up completely. They knew exactly why I didn't want her around my child. 2 years ago, she went through a devastating miscarriage with her then-boyfriend, Jamie. It was a heartbreaking time for everyone, including us. Since Harry and I already had a child of our own, we felt a deep sympathy for her loss, and for a while, we tried to be more understanding. We even started inviting her over so she could spend time with Nate. To my surprise, she was actually very sweet to him, something I never expected. At first, it seemed like she had changed. But that didn't last. Soon enough, she was back to her old ways, constantly complaining about how hard her life was, how nothing ever worked out for her, and blaming everyone else for her problems. Whether it was old friends, former bosses, or random people from her past, she always painted herself as the victim, never taking responsibility for anything. Over time, I realized that in her mind, she was never wrong. This year, she announced that she was getting married and sent invitations to everyone except us. Given that things between us seemed to have improved, Harry was genuinely surprised. When he asked her about it, she told him she didn't want me there because she was afraid I would cause a disturbance at her wedding. I had never done anything to disrupt her life, so I called her directly to ask why she would think that. That's when she admitted that she had intentionally worn black to my wedding as a way to be petty, and now she was worried that I might do the same to her. That was her actual reasoning. I was furious and immediately told Harry that this was just another example of her manipulative behavior. After talking it over with his parents, Harry made a decision. If she was going to treat us this way, then not only would we not be attending the wedding, but his parents also wouldn't be paying for it. That sent her into a meltdown. She burst into tears, blaming me for ruining everything. But her own husband shut that down, telling her she had no one to blame but herself. Even then, she tried to brush it off, saying I should just get over it since our wedding had been years ago. A little while later, she messaged me, apologizing and asking for forgiveness, though it was pretty clear it was only because my in-laws still refused to pay for her wedding. And as much as I hate to admit it, Kayla can be incredibly charming when she wants something. I decided to let the past go and move on. Her wedding to Jamie went off without a hitch, and we all attended, even managing to enjoy ourselves. But less than 6 months later, she showed up at our doorstep, complaining that her marriage was already falling apart. For a few days, Harry and I let Kayla stay with us, and during that time, all she did was vent about her husband. Hour after hour, she'd complain, making it sound like every problem in their marriage was Jamie's fault. They were apparently struggling to conceive, And instead of seeing it as something they were facing together, she put all the blame squarely on him. When I tried to talk to her about it, she doubled down, insisting it was entirely his issue, as if she had no part in it whatsoever. But when she wasn't ranting about Jamie, she had an unhealthy fixation on our lives, finding problems where none existed. Take my gym routine, for example. Most mornings before work, I hit the gym. On days when I'm running late, I bring my... Kayla had apparently been watching this pattern for a while, and one day, she started questioning me about it, asking why I needed to shower, why I even bothered going to the gym so often. At first, I didn't think much of it and just told her the truth. I like staying in shape, and I don't want to show up to the office all sweaty. She just nodded, licking her lips, which, looking back, was a little unsettling. Later, during lunch, my mother-in-law was telling us about a friend of hers who was going through a nasty divorce. Apparently, the woman had found out her husband was cheating, so she left him and took half of his assets. Out of nowhere, Kayla cut her off and turned to Harry, asking if we had signed a prenup before getting married. The room went silent. We all just stared at her. Even our food was forgotten. She looked directly at Harry, completely ignoring my presence, as if the question had nothing to do with me. Without hesitation, Harry answered bluntly, he and I both earned good money, and we never felt the need for a prenup. That's when Kayla snorted and smirked, saying that he could be blindsided at any moment because cheaters are everywhere these days. Her comment hit a nerve. I was offended, and I asked her straight up what exactly she was trying to say. That's when she let it all out, claiming that I was obviously sneaking around with someone else since I was always carrying a change of clothes. She went on to say that, as Harry's sister, it was her duty to warn him. I was completely stunned. I couldn't believe the audacity. Before I could even process what she was saying, my in-laws jumped in, shutting her down and telling her to stop sticking her nose where it didn't belong. But Kayla wasn't finished. She kept pushing, claiming she was only looking out for her brother. Then, in the most disgusting move yet, she actually joked about whether our son, Nate, was even Harry's, saying he didn't look much like him. I swear, I saw the rage take over my husband's face. In all the years I had known him, I had never seen him this angry. Staring his sister dead in the eye, he told her something that made the entire room go still. He said she wasn't a mother yet because she didn't deserve to be one. That her lost child was better off in heaven than being raised by someone like her. Kayla's mouth fell open, completely speechless. My in-laws stayed quiet, just watching as Harry stood up and laid into her, calling her a shameless woman who thrived on trying to ruin other people's happiness because her own life had nothing to offer. He told her she was nothing but a loser, spending her days doing nothing while her husband worked nonstop. And if she wanted to talk about projection, she should focus on fixing her own marriage instead of questioning mine and asking about prenups. By then, Kayla was sobbing. She turned to Jamie for comfort, but he just sat there, silent. He didn't say a word. Harry was fuming. He never loses his temper like that, but this time, he had reached his limit. Eventually, Kayla got up and ran to the bathroom, still crying, while my husband sat there, visibly trying to calm himself down. I placed my hand on his, silently reassuring him. My mother-in-law stepped in to ease the tension, and once things settled a little, Harry turned to me and apologized for what his sister had said about our son. I just nodded. I knew how frustrating she could be, and honestly, it was a relief to see my husband finally standing up for me so openly. Once he cooled off, he apologized to Jamie, but he completely ignored Kayla. That day, after lunch, we all went about our business without another word to her. But it wasn't just me anymore, her actions were starting to take a toll on Harry too. So, we decided to cut her out entirely. We blocked her from everything, making it so that if she wanted to reach us, she had to go through someone else. Later that evening, my in-laws sat down with us. They agreed. Kayla had crossed the line this time. Seeing their usually quiet and level-headed son explode like that was enough for them to realize just how much damage she had done. We hadn't spoken to Kayla in over a year, and honestly, life had been peaceful. But 2 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. Given that we weren't actively trying, it came as a complete surprise. Still, Harry and I felt incredibly blessed to be welcoming another baby into our family. We decided to share the news on Harry's birthday, wanting it to be a special moment. His parents, eager to celebrate him, were throwing a big party in their backyard, inviting close friends and family. Somehow, Kayla caught wind of the event and decided to show up unannounced. When we saw her, Harry and I were completely taken aback. She walked right up to him, threw her arms around him, and told him how much she had missed him. Then, in the same breath, she started apologizing for their last conversation, acting as if she had just had some grand realization. But Harry wasn't having it. He pulled back and told her, plain and simple, that if she was really sorry, she needed to apologize to me because I was the one she had insulted the most. Kayla turned to me, hesitated for a moment, and then mumbled an apology. She claimed she had been in therapy for the past few months and now understood how horribly she had treated me. I didn't buy it, but for the sake of keeping the peace in front of everyone, I just nodded and let it go. My in-laws quickly checked in with us, letting us know they had no idea she'd be coming and were more than willing to ask her to leave if we wanted. But Harry, not wanting to cause a scene, decided to let it slide. Strangely enough, Kayla spent the whole party laughing, chatting, and acting like nothing had ever happened. She kept bringing up her therapy sessions, so I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe she was trying. When it was time to cut the cake, Harry gave a heartfelt speech about how lucky he felt, how grateful he was for another year, and for having me by his side. His words made me blush, and for a moment, I was reminded of the love we had when we first started dating all those years ago. Then came the big moment. With huge smiles, Harry and I announced to everyone that we were expecting a baby. The reaction was immediate: cheers, gasps, and happy tears. My mother rushed over, crying as she hugged me. My father-in-law, usually a man of few words, actually teared up as he congratulated us. Everyone was ecstatic, eager to know if we had picked out any names yet. Everyone except Kayla. While the rest of the group was celebrating, she just sat there, frozen. Her whole demeanor shifted. She looked irritated, almost resentful, before turning away from us completely. At first, I assumed she was just processing the news, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to ruin yet another important day for us. Still, I was too distracted by the love and support from our family to dwell on it. When I got up to help my in-laws carry out lunch, my parents and Rick insisted I stay seated, saying I shouldn't even be moving in my condition. That's when Kayla suddenly reappeared, this time with a big smile on her face. Bubbling with enthusiasm, she told me she wanted to personally bring me my meal, her way of making up for all the times she had been awful to me. She handed me a plate, beaming, saying she was so happy for my pregnancy. I gave her a polite nod and accepted it without thinking much. But just as she turned to leave, something on the plate caught my eye. Shrimp. I stared at it, confused. I'm highly allergic to shrimp. It's something everyone in the family knows, including Kayla. There's no way she would have just forgotten. Disappointed but not wanting to cause a scene, I quietly set the plate aside and got up to get my own food. That's when Jamie walked over to congratulate me on the pregnancy. We chatted for a moment before he noticed I wasn't eating and asked why. I pointed at the plate and casually mentioned that Kayla had given it to me, but since it had shrimp, I couldn't eat it. Jamie, not thinking much of it, reassured me and took the plate from my hands, saying he'd eat it instead. He liked shrimp, after all, and I could just grab a new plate for myself. I smiled, thanked him, and turned away. Not even 5 minutes later, Jamie was vomiting violently. The moment Jamie started vomiting uncontrollably, the entire party came to a halt. All eyes were on him as he staggered to his feet, clearly in distress. Harry and Kayla rushed to his side, their faces filled with concern. Jamie clutched at his throat, his expression one of pure panic. He motioned toward his plate, trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. A terrifying realization hit us all at once. Whatever he had eaten had made him seriously ill. Then, in an instant, he collapsed. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people scrambled to help. Someone called for an ambulance, while Kayla, now sobbing uncontrollably, rushed to his plate. The moment she saw what was on it, her face paled. Slowly, she turned toward me, eyes burning with accusation. "Did you give this to Jamie?" she demanded. Still in shock, I simply nodded. The next few minutes were a blur. Paramedics arrived and rushed Jamie to the hospital. Kayla never stopped crying, but her tear-filled glares in my direction made it clear she blamed me for what had happened. Then came the worst news of all. At the hospital, we were informed that Jamie had been poisoned. The realization nearly knocked the wind out of me. If Jamie hadn't taken my plate, that poisoned food would have gone straight into my mouth, straight to my unborn child. The very thought made my stomach churn. My hands shook as I processed everything. No one else knew yet, not Harry, not my in-laws, not even my parents. But I knew. I knew exactly what had almost happened. Because I knew exactly who had handed me that plate. With no clear explanation for how Jamie had been poisoned, the police got involved. They needed to analyze the food, gather evidence, and figure out what had caused him to collapse. Meanwhile, Jamie remained in the hospital, still recovering. Harry and I have been bombarded with calls from relatives, all desperate to know what happened. They want answers. They want to know who could have poisoned Jamie. And I'm terrified of what the truth might mean. The thought of telling everyone that the plate was originally meant for me fills me with dread. If this turns into a full-blown investigation, I'll have no choice but to tell the police the truth. But more than that, I'm terrified of Kayla. I don't want to be anywhere near her. I don't want my children anywhere near her. She has no boundaries, none. I don't know what she's capable of anymore. Wow! I never expected this post to blow up like it did. The number of comments and messages I've received in just a few hours is overwhelming. When I first typed this, my hands were shaking. I still haven't been able to sleep. A lot of people are saying I shouldn't blame myself for what happened to Jamie, but I can't help it. I keep replaying that moment in my head. I should have just thrown the plate away. I don't know why I let him take it. Harry has been hovering around me all night, worried. He knows something's wrong, but he doesn't know the full extent of it yet. He thinks I'm just shaken up over Jamie's condition, and I've let him believe that for now. But a lot of you are right. I need to talk to my family. I need to tell them the truth. Thankfully, my in-laws have security cameras all over their property. Since the party took place in their backyard, we might actually have proof of what happened. I'm going to sit everyone down tonight and tell them everything. I'll update again afterward. I just had one of the hardest conversations of my life, but I'm beyond grateful for the in-laws I have. Since my mother-in-law, ML, and father-in-law, FIL, were already staying at our house, I gathered them and Harry for dinner, took a deep breath, and told them I had something important to say. The weight of everything pressed down on me as I spoke. I walked them through the events of the party, explaining how Kayla had personally brought me a plate of food, how I'd set it aside when I saw the shrimp, and how Jamie, completely unaware, had taken it instead. ML and FIL exchanged uneasy glances. Harry's expression darkened, shifting from confusion to anger. Then, voice shaking, I finally admitted my biggest fear. I don't think this was an accident. Silence. I hesitated, heart pounding, before voicing what had been gnawing at me all night. Kayla knew I was allergic to shrimp. She's always known. MIL, ever the rational one, sat up straighter. You're saying she did this on purpose? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But I can't ignore the possibility. FIL exhaled sharply, nodding. Then we need to check the security cameras. And just like that, everyone agreed. Given how serious this was, we couldn't afford not to. Whatever was on those tapes, whatever they showed, was about to change everything. The moment Harry pressed play on the security footage, the entire room fell into silence. There was no denying it now. The video clearly showed Kayla handing me the plate, her expression unreadable, followed by Jamie unknowingly taking it instead. Every horrifying second played out in front of us, the moment he started eating, the way his body reacted, the chaos that followed. No one spoke for a long time. Harry sat motionless, his jaw clenched tight. His face was a mix of disbelief and anger, like he was struggling to process the reality of what his own sister had done. My in-laws, normally composed people, looked absolutely shattered. Seeing their daughter, their own flesh and blood, stoop so low was something they never could have imagined. We all kept asking ourselves the same question. Why? Why would Kayla do this? What had driven her to such a twisted, dangerous act? But no amount of reasoning could justify what we had just witnessed. This wasn't some petty family drama. This was attempted murder. My in-laws, as heartbroken as they were, knew this couldn't be ignored. After a heavy discussion, they decided to hand the footage over to the police. The evidence was undeniable, and it was only a matter of time before Kayla faced the consequences of her actions. Since Jamie was the one who had actually suffered from the poisoning, he would have to be the one to press charges. Phil and Harry planned to visit him at the hospital once he had recovered enough to talk. Meanwhile, I felt completely wrecked with guilt. The thought of Jamie suffering because of my plate made me sick to my stomach. I had barely eaten or slept since that night, and every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was him collapsing. I had no idea how he would react when he found out the full truth. All right, everyone, I finally have an update. I know it's been a month since my last post, but I've had a lot going on, especially with my pregnancy. First things first, Kayla was arrested. After my in-laws turned over the footage, the police wasted no time. The evidence was ironclad. And the most shocking part? She didn't even try to deny it. The moment they confronted her, she broke down in tears and confessed to everything. Jamie, still recovering from the whole ordeal, was just as stunned as the rest of us when Harry told him the truth. Harry made it clear, no matter what Jamie decided, he would always be part of our family. But he also told him, without hesitation, that he should press charges. What Kayla had done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. And Jamie agreed. As soon as he was well enough, he officially filed charges against her. But that wasn't all. He also filed for divorce. Kayla completely lost it. She called my in-laws, sobbing and begging them to forgive her, claiming she had made a mistake. Then, in a desperate attempt to manipulate them, she dropped a bombshell: she was pregnant. She pleaded with them to help her, saying they had to do this for the sake of their future granddaughter. But Phil wasn't having it. He told her point-blank that she needed to take responsibility for her actions. ML was heartbroken, of course. As much as she loved her daughter, she knew what Kayla had done was beyond redemption. There was no excuse for it. The investigation uncovered further evidence that Kayla had deliberately tampered with the food, intending to poison me. But in a cruel twist of fate, she had ended up harming her own husband instead. Now, she's facing multiple charges, including attempted harm, reckless endangerment, and food tampering. And despite her desperate attempts to sway Jamie, he refused to back down. He was determined to see her face justice. Her court date is coming up soon, and honestly, I don't see how she could possibly get out of this. For those asking, my baby and I are doing fine. Our son, thankfully, has no idea what his aunt did. But Harry and I have decided that when he's old enough, we will sit him down and tell him the truth. It's important that he understands why we cut ties with Kayla. As for my pregnancy, I've been getting frequent ultrasounds, just as my doctor recommended. We've decided to keep the baby's gender a surprise, which has been exciting. But if I'm being honest, I'm struggling. Ever since this whole ordeal, I've developed an intense fear of eating food I didn't prepare myself. It's irrational, I know, but I can't shake it. My parents have been worried about me and have encouraged me to get therapy, and I think they're right. Harry has been my rock through all of this. He knows what I'm going through, and he's been nothing but patient and supportive. I just hope with time, I can move past this. It's been 8 months since my last update. And in case you were wondering, yes, Kayla is in prison. She was found guilty on all charges. I never attended Kayla's court hearings, but my in-laws kept me updated on how everything played out. Apparently, when she stood before the judge, she came clean about everything. She admitted that her resentment toward me had been brewing for years. From the very start, she had never wanted me to be with Harry. She had always hoped that one of her closest friends would marry him instead, so when he chose me, She saw me as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their family. That's why she spent years trying to make my life miserable. But what truly pushed her over the edge was our pregnancy announcement. She had been planning to share her own big news that night. She was pregnant, too. And after experiencing a miscarriage before, she had been waiting for the perfect moment to tell everyone. In her mind, we had stolen that from her. Instead of being the center of attention, she felt overshadowed. And in her twisted, jealous rage, amplified by pregnancy hormones, she made the decision to poison my food. She admitted that she had mixed a small amount of rat poison into my plate, hoping it would send me to the hospital. But, according to her, she never wanted to harm my baby or cause any lasting damage. As if that somehow made it better. She even tried to argue for a reduced sentence, claiming that she hadn't actually meant to poison Jamie, that had been my fault for handing him my plate. Of course, the judge wasn't buying any of it. Kayla was sentenced to prison, and she won't be a part of our lives for a very long time. Meanwhile, Jamie is finally free. The divorce was finalized, and over the past several months, we've made sure to include him in our family gatherings. When I finally got the chance to sit down and talk to him, I broke down in tears. I had been carrying so much guilt over what happened, replaying it in my mind over and over, wishing I had done something different. But Jamie, being the kind and forgiving person he is, reassured me that none of this was my fault. Hearing him say that lifted a weight off my chest. Now, as for me and Harry, our family has grown. A few months ago, we welcomed our baby daughter into the world. Despite everything we've been through, she has brought so much warmth and light into our lives. And Nate? He's absolutely in love with his little sister. Watching him be such a caring, protective big brother makes all the struggles of the past feel distant. Through it all, our families have stood by our side, helping us navigate this new chapter in our lives. I'm beyond grateful for the love and support we've received,